Good morning, Bitcoiners. Hello, and welcome back to another edition of your Bitcoin Economic Calendar, the news and analysis you need to start the week off right in Bitcoin. Today is Monday, May 3rd, and as always, we have a jam-packed episode. In today's issue, we're going to be talking about the Bitcoin corporate earnings, which are set to continue this week with PayPal and Square both set to report. We're also going to talk about Biden's first 100-day speech, which was out Friday evening, and we're going to discuss how his new $4 trillion plan could impact Bitcoin. And lastly, but certainly not least, we're going to talk about the Bitcoin micro futures, which start trading today at the CME and could have very meaningful implications for price action. So, big episode today as always. Grab your coffees, on to our analysis. Before we get going on today's show, we wanted to remind you and announce that we are going to be holding our rates at 6.1% for your first 2 Bitcoin and 2.25% for balances above 2 Bitcoin, as well as 12.5% APY on our USDC savings accounts. So if you don't yet have a Ledn account, check out ledn.io and see how you can start earning the top rates for your Bitcoin and USDC savings. You can also check out our loan products, B2X and our Bitcoin-backed loans. Now, starting as we usually do with Bitcoin, we see that last week Bitcoin had a really strong week, up 15.25%, closing Sunday evening at $56,622 for the weekly period. Now, as we mentioned, the focus around Bitcoin markets today will be around the highly anticipated Bitcoin micro futures launch at the CME. Now, why is this important? This is important because it'll make Bitcoin CME futures much easier to trade for both professional traders and institutions alike. The size of the Bitcoin micro future contract would be approximately half a Bitcoin, which is about 10 times smaller than the current contract at 5 Bitcoin. So think of it as trading Bitcoin in $30,000 increments versus $300,000 increments. Much more convenient. Other relevant news out of last week was that Nexon, a South Korean Japanese video game publisher, announced on Tuesday that it had purchased $100 million worth of Bitcoin for its balance sheet. We're going to talk about how that could play into the continuation of the earnings cycle, which is basically in full force. And this week it's continuing. As we said, PayPal and Square are both scheduled to report. We're going to talk about the details of those announcements in our What's Ahead section today. Now, elsewhere last week, we also saw that the SEC last Wednesday postponed the ruling on the VanEck Bitcoin ETF proposal. It has essentially extended the timeline for a decision until mid-June. Interesting to point out, all previous Bitcoin ETF applications have been denied by the SEC. However, this will be the first decision that will be issued with Gary Gensler, who has taught blockchain courses at MIT, as a part of the SEC in making this decision. Elsewhere, other important and meaningful news for Bitcoin last week was that we saw headlines out of JP Morgan saying that it announced last Monday that it is preparing to offer a Bitcoin fund to its wealthy investors as early as this summer. For context, JP Morgan is the largest bank in North America, and in 2017, here's an interesting stat that I wanted to highlight. In 2017, JP Morgan Asset and Wealth Management held a record $2.8 trillion in client assets. So, not really need to highlight why this is so important that JP Morgan is now going out to their clients to offer them Bitcoin. Elsewhere, another news that made headlines around the Bitcoin community was that Tesla announced that it had trimmed its Bitcoin position by 10%, receiving proceeds of $272 million in the process. Now, Tesla, as per these numbers, continues to hold approximately $2.44 billion in Bitcoin on its balance sheet. And during the call, the Tesla CFO stated that the company will continue to invest in Bitcoin. Now, again, a very packed week. We're going to be covering what we're seeing in the Bitcoin futures and options markets for this week in our What's Ahead section later today. Now, moving on to the S&P 500, we see that it closed last week by hitting a fresh new all-time high of 4,189 points and closing last week up 32 base points or 0.32%. Elsewhere, we see that the Dow Jones had a down week last week, down 50 base points at 33,874 points. And we also see that the NASDAQ had a down week last week, 58 base points at 13,860 points. Now, the big focus that will be, that we get to see the markets react to this week was Biden's 100-day speech, which actually came out Friday evening. So we're going to start seeing how the markets digest or react to that speech actually in the price action today. Just going back quickly before we get into that, we see that just going back to the S&P, we see that the S&P is already off to the races. And if it closed right now, it would close at a new all-time high. So we'll see if that momentum continues. But to touch back on Biden's plan for a second, essentially, last Friday evening, Biden gave his first 100-day speech, which provided some details around his $4 trillion package, which would be in addition to the already deployed $1.9 billion. So as mentioned, this morning we get to see how markets react, and they seem to be taking the news pretty positively. So elsewhere in the equity markets, we also wanted to highlight the Russell 2000 index. So, as we've been covering here, the Russell 2000 index has a very key level of 2,293 points, which Fundstrat investment strategist Tom Lee is watching as confirmation of another leg higher for markets in general. Now, looking at the chart, it did not get that weekly close above 2293 as he was expecting. However, we do see that it surpassed that level intra-week, and that the formation from a technical standpoint does look like it is coiling up to make a strong directional move. Now, in addition to this, there are a slew of earnings coming out this week, as well as Fed speakers scheduled throughout the week and economic data scheduled to come out again throughout the week. So we'll be breaking those down and going into detail about the dates and times when those come out in our What's Ahead section later today. Moving over to our analysis of gold prices, we see that last week gold had a down week, down 47 base points or almost 0.5% at $1,768 per ounce. Now, the dollar index last week had actually a very strong week, finishing up 73 base points, actually 51 base points here. And the yield on the 10-year Treasury note, the yield on the 10-year Treasury note also was up 4.08%, closing the week at 1.63%. That's the yield on the 10-year note. Now, looking at gold, we also saw some positive news out of China for gold demand, and that basically stated that China's 2021 gold demand is seen to be reverting back to pre-pandemic levels. Now, even with these strong headlines, gold prices are struggling to rally, even on the back of positive news. We see that might be changing this morning, as we've started out with a pretty interesting price action this morning, up 1.46%. On this, this could also be being impacted by Biden's speech. Again, that was out Friday evening, and the markets didn't really have time to digest or react until now. Quick note on how Biden's speech could impact gold prices this week. Well, on the one hand, more spending does generate inflation fears within the U.S. However, it also creates deflationary pressures worldwide and provides incentives to invest in more industrial or productive assets. So again, it's a bit of a tug of war, but we'll see how the price action plays out. Seems to be working out pretty favorably for gold at the moment. Moving over to the DeFi index, it was a really big week for the DeFi index, closing at 14,706 points, up 27.35%. Ethereum also had a stellar week, up 27.13% at $2,951 per Ethereum. Now, the news or the price action was very likely helped or assisted in this sector by an announcement that came out of the European Investment Bank last Friday, which was that the European Investment Bank, the lending arm of the European Union, announced on Friday that it had used Ethereum technology to issue a bond worth 100 million euros, equivalent to approximately 121 million US dollars, in 2-year digital notes for the first time ever. Now, while this does not have a direct effect on the value of Ether, the asset, the event does legitimize Ethereum, the blockchain. And indirectly, it also feeds into the Ethereum as an institutional grade asset narrative. So again, very interesting development out of the EU. We'll continue to monitor how this could impact Ethereum prices going forward. Now, moving over to our Bitcoin mining difficulty commentary, we had a significantly difficulty adjustment kick in Saturday, which brought difficulty down 12.68% to 20.68 terahashes. Now, this has helped speed up times between blocks, and it may help unclog the network further as the week rolls through. The mempool, as you can see on the screen behind you, is back at March levels with next block confirmation times north of 60 sats per VByte at the time of writing last evening. Now, very, very importantly, and this is something that we are very, very excited about, Saturday's difficulty adjustment kicks off the first phase of activation for Bitcoin's Taproot upgrade. This is Bitcoin's biggest upgrade in years. Among many things, it will make Bitcoin multi-signature transactions cheaper, more private, and easier to deploy. So again, super exciting, and we'll be diving deeper into Taproot in the coming weeks. Now, as always, we leave you with what's ahead for the week. So first off, let's cover the time-sensitive stuff. As we mentioned, Bitcoin corporate earnings continue this week, with PayPal reporting on Wednesday and Square reporting this Thursday. Both of these earnings calls could be meaningful for Bitcoin, and there's also the potential for a wildcard Bitcoin allocation announcement like the one we saw out of Nexon last week. And just to note, Activision Blizzard and Akamai Technologies are both reporting this Tuesday as well. Now, also, there is a slew of Fed speakers scheduled throughout the week, with Jay Powell starting today, and one or more Fed speakers basically taking or speaking to Congress throughout the week until Friday. Now, on Thursday and Friday, we get very important U.S. economic indicator data being released, with initial jobless claims and employment data on Thursday and Friday, respectively. Now, what could impact markets in the coming weeks and months? First, more U.S. stimulus will have an indirect impact on Bitcoin and crypto markets. So for that, I wanted to switch over quickly to an article and reference that. And this is a Harris poll that essentially highlights that 1 in 10 Americans have used stimulus checks to invest in crypto. And while Biden's plan may not include direct checks to Americans, it could indirectly benefit the crypto markets in a similar way. Now, as a follow-on to that, Biden also announced that he intends to play for his plan in a large way by taxing the wealthy. While nothing has been said or announced yet for higher corporate taxes, this could have an impact on asset prices in general, this higher capital gains for individuals. It will also incentivize more borrowing against these assets to optimize capital gains treatment. This should also help putting some of that excess cash in the system to good use. Now, speaking of excess cash, we wanted to show you the combined market capitalization of the major stablecoins has increased substantially since April 19th. As you can see here, those very big step ups from both BUSD and USDC and Tether. So again, very, very meaningful increments. For stablecoins, increased stablecoin supply tends to be a tailwind for crypto markets in general. Now, in addition to the stablecoins, let's take a look here at the futures markets for Bitcoin. We see here that most exchanges are showing a very healthy contango. Actually, all exchanges are showing a very healthy contango, with most of them showing Bitcoin north of $60,000 for that July expiry contract. And last but certainly not least, let's take a look at what the option markets are showing us. Seeing here at the May contract, we see that it is pricing a probability of Bitcoin being above $60,000 of 42.38% as of this morning. And lastly, to close it off, regardless of what Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett said about Bitcoin over the weekend, the fact is they had to address it at their annual meeting at the request of their investors. Let that sink in. The fact of the matter is that they don't understand Bitcoin. However, many people will now research Bitcoin as a result of their comments. Oh, and Bill Maher's comments too. The people who research it will reach their own conclusions. So that's a good thing for Bitcoin. Big week coming up as always, guys and girls. We'll keep you posted on any relevant news and events right here through the Bitcoin Economic Calendar or through our social media account at HODL with Ledin. If you have any questions on the content that we covered today, if you have any items that you would like us to cover in future issues, please feel free to drop a question or a comment down in the comment section. If you enjoyed the show, if you liked the show today, we welcome you to like it, subscribe it, and share. If you don't yet have a Ledin account, I welcome you to check out Ledin.io and learn how you can earn the best rates in the industry at 6.1% for your first 2 Bitcoin and 12.5% for your USDC at Ledin.io. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful week and see you next one.